Hello, welcome to Movie Umpers. My name is Bob Sham.
My name is Angela.
And the sounds you hear may be dogs, and we're in our final week of September's European vacation. Our final week before we coast into our second annual Halloween Hump Fest, in which we do a horror drop every weekday in October. Fun themes, fun movies, but more of that later. We're done with the French. No more French movies, I swear to God. Not for into the end of time, but for a little while here. For a classic selection, we're going to hit it back to Italy. We're talking about the film Bicycle Thieves from 1948 by Vittorio De Sica, written by Oreste Biancoli, Suso D'Amico, Cesare Zavattini, Luigi Bartolini. There's actually several writers attached to this, starring Lamberto Maggioriani, Enzo Stiola, Leonela Carrel, Gino Sottomarenda. Cinematography by Carlo Montuori. I'm doing the hand gesture. Bicycle Thieves.
I found it written as Bicycle Thieves and sometimes The Bicycle Thief. And both work, but
Bicycle Thieves works better because it forebodes something that's going to happen at the end.
Or it's talking about this whole thing because there's a lot of bicycle thieves in this movie. There's a whole network of bicycle thieves in this movie. I think The Bicycle Thief is more interesting because it's like, who are you talking about? Bicycle
Thieves encompasses the cyclical nature of poverty and how it just forces people to eat itself.
Absolutely.
Someone who is so desperate, he just wants to work, but his shit gets stolen. And when his back is against the wall, what else can he do to feed his family? He's going to have to steal a bicycle.
The person who steals his bike, you think of them as the bicycle thief for most of the movie, but at the end you realize he is the bicycle thief.
I did just see the trailer that's playing above us here, and it did say The Bicycle Thief. You just pick one, whatever you want.
Thief. I think if you look at the Italian, I don't think it's plural. So I think it's The Bicycle Thief, and I think that actually lends more. I think it means more if it's singular.
For the sake of our credit scroll, it's Bicycle Thieves.
Okay.
But it doesn't really matter. Whatever you want. You're listening, you're watching, it's whatever you want. This movie is one of the best representations of poverty in film. And I think it's something that, at least here in American movies, that when we represent poverty or what that means, we, at this point in movie making, film, whatever, it does seem like a lot of the arts are more geared towards people with well-to-do means. And I'm not saying that this is going to affect whether or not they make a good movie or a bad movie. People who are born rich can make good movies. We've seen it. But it does seem like as more of the industry is giving way to nepotism and being handed down to like a lineage or some shit, that the understanding of the nature of poverty and how that can be represented on screen, it either seems completely overdone or just inaccurate in terms of what it's actually like to be poor. And I think when you're talking about any movie, that what is one of the greatest movies to represent how poverty cycles into itself and eats itself. I mean, you could call this an anti-capitalist movie. This is post-war Italy coming out of their own fascist regime. They're having to rebuild their society post-Mussolini, and shit's struggling. And no one really shows struggle as well as these Italian directors. They seem to be, it just seems to come very natural to them. And of course, the religion plays into it and that structure and how it all works. But before we really start breaking down the movie, a very simple movie. The child in this movie, Bruno. Let me get my phrasing correct, because this is, I want to be modern. I want to be hip. I want to say things that the kids will hear and be like, let's make this guy viral. Was Bruno serving cunt?
Papà, ha visto che ci hanno fatto?
Che ci hanno fatto?
Un'ammaccatura.
Che ci avevo fatto? Magari c'era.
No, non c'era, questa è una botta che gli hanno dato. Chissà come le tengono. Io gli avrei detto. Mica ripagano riparazioni.
Because he was giving a little cunty a little free school lunch.
Is that the way the kids say it?
He was giving rare Beanie Babies.
I don't even know if
that
the
are
kids
really
know what that
that
is.
are really cute. He was giving.
He was a grown-up man in a 8-year-old's body.
It seemed like he and his dad were peers more than anything.
Absolutely. His dad even treated him that way most of the time.
Well, he does slap him when he's a little argumentative, but then he feels really bad about it.
And the kid seems totally shocked by that. His dad is in charge and he listens to his father, but they both go to work. They both earn money for the family. There's a part where he's going to his job and the mom makes sandwiches. He hands one to his kid, drops his kid off at his kid's job, and then goes to do his job. They are partners.
They have to be. They're so fucking broke. Everyone's going to have to work. Everyone's got to eat.
They also have a new baby.
They are Catholic, and God bless the Catholic Church. The ancient pedophile ring that goes into AIDS-stricken countries and tells them not to use contraception. Thank you, Catholic Church. But yes, our lead here, Lamberto Maggioriani as Antonio Ricci. He is a guy that needs some work, but he can get work if he just has a bicycle. He happened to have pawned his bike. And how does he get the bike back?
He goes home and tells his wife, because he took the job, but he knows he needs to get his bike.
They
he tells
pawn
his
their
wife,
linens.
She takes the sheets off their bed and she pulls the sheets out of a drawer that were part of her dowry that have never been used. And she takes them. And this part I particularly love because they go to this little window and there's a long line of people. And she gets up there with the sheets and he offers her money. And they say, can you do a little more? And he does. He gives them more money than that. Later you see him taking this bundle of sheets and putting it on this wall of just thousands and thousands of sheet sets. They're never going to use them. This is one instance where they do talk about a family allowance at one point, so they do.
But apparently you need
money.
to work to get it.
There's also welfare, but there's some strings attached to that too. It's all a little shady because there is a group of men that get together and talk about work.
They seem to be some kind of a labor organization, and they bemoan welfare because it's demeaning.
Under the city somewhere.
They also might be a little gangstery because they seem to know exactly where a bike would go once it's all disassembled and knows what to look for their particular bike.
You have people who want to work and there are simply not enough jobs for them.
Right.
Whether that's because people can't pay them. They do talk about when he gets his bike and he goes to the job. He tells his wife later, they used to also give out shirts or shoes, but they can't do that anymore. So everyone, in light of cutting out of this wartime, no one has enough money. And people who need help want to hire people, but what are they going to pay them with?
And he does get the gig because he gets his bike out after selling their sheets, and it's a gig of gluing, pasting movie starlet posters up on the wall, and he's slapping Rita Hayworth on the side of a building. Not too great. He's not doing a great job, but it is his first day.
He would have gotten better if his bike hadn't been stolen on the first poster he did on his own.
But that contrast of this poor man who had to sell sheets to get his bike out of hock is now have a job where he puts up posters of super glamorous people from another country, right? But when he's putting up the Rita Hayworth poster, that's when a man, and you can tell that there's a group involved. We learned in Pickpocket, a very informative movie, that it's best to have a group. And you see a kid grab the bike, take off.
And then there's a man who looks very befuddled that kind of runs into him.
Who slows him down, but you can tell that he's scouting the situation. And you feel this man's desperation when he's trying to get at this bike, but he cannot.
And everyone around wants to help. There's multiple times where we see gangs of people chasing someone who has been called a thief. He jumps on the boards on someone's car and they drive him a direction. They think the guy has gone, but they've lost him.
Do you think the guy that jumped on that tried to give directions misled, like he's a part of the posse?
I think he was bad because he jumped on as well and he was like, he went down that tunnel. That was the wrong way to go.
The very subtle underworld things like that doesn't explain itself explicitly, but if you're paying attention, that guy's probably in on the grift. There's one point where they get the labor group to help the guys out, and they sincerely want to help them out, but it just doesn't go well. And they have the kid, little Bruno, and he's looking at horns and stuff, and there's this creep just talking to him, and it's like, without ever explaining anything, you just know, oh, this guy is a fucking pedo.
Because he says, you've been here for 30 minutes. Isn't this a nice bell? Don't you want this bell? I'll buy it for you. It's so slimy. But Bruno's scouting the bells and horns, and a different guy is looking for the wheels, and a different guy is looking for the frames, because they know that this guy's bike is not going to be in one piece as it was stolen. They have to find the parts and then call the cops. Because he did go to the cops, but the cops are not going to look for this guy's bike. There's so many bikes.
We got it's about a 24-hour period until the work week begins again that he has to get his bike back.
One thing that was interesting to me is that when he goes into this underground space where the labor group is meeting and he gets his guy who's going to help him, they're rehearsing a play. No one has any money, but they're still trying to have fun and have something meaningful in their lives. They're also fussing at each other, but that's what you do. They're trying to put on a play. It was very sweet.
There's a one point where he and Bruno, they do have some money from selling the sheets. They're having to pinch tight for it. But he opts to take Bruno to a restaurant. And this is a great scene in this movie that shows the distinct class levels and poverty levels here, where they want a pizza, but it's not a pizzeria. So they get a mozzarella sandwich and they get a whole bottle of wine or something.
It's like a whole carafe of wine.
It's Italy, so 6-year-olds can drink wine.
Although he says, if your mom saw me give you wine.
The mother feels like a saintly character.
She's a good woman. I think she would fuss about it, but I don't think she would stop it. I think she'd be being a good mom by saying, don't give him any more than that. But she seems genuinely sweet, and she really loves Antonio, and she doesn't hesitate for 1 second when he tells her he's got this job, but he needs his bike, to start ripping their sheets off the bed. You know, she's very practical in my mind.
Antonio and Bruno are in this restaurant, and there's a family with money down in the corner.
Kid with this like floofy hair.
And this kid has the sleepiest looking expression you've ever seen. He's probably thinking about the nice feather bed and silk sheets that this kid sleeps on. And Bruno... And the Bruno's looking back, and it's like the kid can tell that Bruno is looking at him, and he's looking back at the same time while this kid...
kind of showing off.
Bruno is feeling great eating his mozzarella sandwich with some wine, and he's looking at this other table, and there's a full feast with people dressed in fine garb. Well, near the end here, Antonio thinks he sees the guy that took the bike, and he sees that guy talking to an old man, and then the guy takes off, he can't catch him. And then he follows this old man constantly. He follows him into like a church because the church is providing like shaving and stuff.
It's shaves and food, but this is before he slaps Bruno, because he slaps Bruno as they're leaving, because Bruno says to him, why did you let that old man get away?
State zitta pure te. E mo che fai?
Mannaggia.
Anna, poi cammina.
No, gioio.
Anna, moglie via.
No,
Vuoi venire o non vuoi venire?
no, non voglio venire.
Bruno. Anna, ma muoviti.
Leading up to that, he does chase this man into the church. They're giving shaves away, they're giving food away, but before you can get your food, you have to go in and listen to a sermon. And they have locked the motherfucking doors on these people. The guy can't figure out how to get out at first. He has to find the back door that the man snuck out of, and that's then when Bruno says, why'd you let him go?
Just like in Fellini movies, I feel like in these Italian movies, the church is ever present as it would be, right? But I feel an undercurrent of resentment for the structure that is down to, it's all that people have to rely on, but like there is this feeling of like, can't we do better than this? And I don't get the feeling from these directors the same way with Fellini that they're necessarily mad at Jesus or the Virgin Mary or anything like that, but just the structure and the ever-present nature of it and how people are so easy to manipulate. And some have said that it very much benefits the Catholic Church to perpetuate this poverty so that it can keep its, charitable cycle, its visage strong and powerful.
That is exactly what I was going to say. These people running this show don't give a fuck about these men. They care about getting another check on their scorecard with Jesus, that they saved these people's souls. They care that the other people will see that they are doing this for people. It's all very virtue signaling.
Well, the greater power of it for sure. I think individuals can be in these horrible systems and have a sincere perspective on it, but it's more of naivety and to think that maybe you can enter into the system and be a part of it and think you can change it. But
potentially, it's just the way they were rough with everyone and barking at them.
Yeah.
It just did not feel very caring or loving. It
Not-
felt
not
very
in this
much
place,
like,
no.
we're going to lock these doors and count these heads, and we're going to get points for this.
so the old man, he gives him some information, but he wants the old man to come with him. He's just relentless here. Does the old man end up going with them?
No, the old man gets away, and
Yeah.
that's when Bruno says, "Why'd you let him go?" And that's when the dad slaps him. They go have dinner. Well, then they're walking home.
And he thinks he sees the kid that took the bike. I don't know if it is the same person or not. Did you recognize
He looked similar, but I don't know 100%.
all these
Because
Italian
we didn't
boys
really
look a
see
lot
that
alike?
kid's face. He had a hat on,
Yeah.
and he had a similar jacket. This is in black and white.
They were
It's
all
also hard to tell.
Everyone was in black and white back then, so it was hard to tell the
Absolutely.
difference.
That's why he wasn't sure if this was the kid or not.
Nothing was in color. Only parts of the planet were in color. Like that's how they made Wizard of
This-
Oz and stuff.
Italy was sepia tones.
Then by the mid 60s, around 1970, I think, then everything was color. Well, he is all over this kid, like, give me this bike, and he starts to draw a crowd. And they're like, okay, well, you need to come up with some evidence, but he has no real proof.
It's just he said, and it's right in front of this kid's house, and the kid's mom is hanging out the window saying, "My kid has no record, leave him alone, he's a good boy."
The kid has a seizure at some point, and he thinks it's all an act. And it's funny because Antonio, he has no choice but to leave this mob, and they're like, don't be accusing things without evidence. And Bruno is just standing with the mob for a second, serving cunt. So he has Bruno, like, the game is over, right? They can't do shit about it. He has Bruno go stand by the water or something.
He tells Bruno, he gives him money to get on the bus and go somewhere. He tells him, go to such and such stop and wait for me. And there is this Coliseum that is letting out. So
Big,
there wasn't that many people.
Soccer, football game.
So there was almost no one on the street. And then all of a sudden, all these people were letting out. And there was a little bit of, it was a little crazy for a second.
And there's
he
a bunch
thought,
of bikes. And he goes down this side street, and there's a bike just leaning. And he's like Natalie Imbruglia, he's torn. But he can't. What choice does this man have? Right? We see him go after this old man to hound him for information on the boy he was talking to. That old man is poor as shit. He's having to go to the Catholic Church to get a shave and a meal and hear some shitty sermon so he can just be fed that day. He goes and he tracks down this boy that he thinks took it. That boy's broke his shit too. He's having seizures and shit. Maybe he did steal his bike, but he's probably in a situation that's not that different from Antonio's.
He lives in one room with his mom and two siblings. We see their house. They
They're-
don't have anything.
It's just they're all in this fishbowl and there's no choice but to consume each other. So Antonio, he doesn't want to, but what else can he do? He takes this bike, and this man runs
Within
up
1 second, as though he were watching
like an
his
alarm
bike.
got trips or something, and he ends up getting chased down. And this crowd looks like they might beat him up, but Bruno runs
Thank goodness
up.
had not gotten on the trolley.
Is like trying to get between them and the father and the crowd. Because the guy got his bike back, the crowd ultimately, they're pissed, but ultimately decide to let him go.
The man decides he doesn't want to press charges.
Yeah.
And if
I
he's
think-
not going to press charges, no one can do anything.
And I think that's another small moment, kind of like with the Sheets person, where he kind of recognizes
he did. He was
that
looking
this
at Bruno.
this isn't going to do anyone any good to like lock this guy up. But the end of the movie is the crowd partying and Antonio and Bruno dejected, just walking away as the crowd disperses. We see their backs and they don't win. they don't get the bike back.
This part is so hard because he did something that he never imagined he would do. He tried to steal from someone else, knowing what that feels like, knowing how awful that is, and his pride and honor, he struggled with the decision to do that, right? But because it did not work out, his son saw him be completely humiliated, almost get taken to jail. Something broke. You know, you say they lost and they did lose, but Bruno's never going to look at his dad the same way again.
Yeah.
And that dad fucking knows that. And it is brutal. And he knows he made a mistake. And he knows he shouldn't have done it. And he didn't want to do it. But it's do I try to steal this thing or do I feed my family?
Right.
I don't think that
anyone would make the feed the family choice.
Absolutely.
If your back is against the wall, that's what you would do.
1,000 times over.
When it comes, like as I stated, when it comes to representations of poverty in film, this is among the best. Absolutely. It's so simple, but it really just shows how poverty eats itself.
Yeah.
And how a little thing can just be so compounded when you have absolutely nothing. And you're getting sad thinking about it. This is the second time we've seen this movie. We were blown away by it the first time we saw it. I don't think it really changes. I think this is an S-tier movie.
It's an S-tier movie. I appreciated it even more this time because of how the way I look at movies has changed through doing this show. This movie is beautiful.
It's a masterpiece. So check it out. For the sake of categorization, we will call it Bicycle Thieves by Vittorio De Sica. Is in between the films Barry Lyndon by Stanley Kubrick and Brazil by Terry Gilliam. Among the finest of all these directors, I would say.
Absolutely.
At least as good as those movies, if not better. Bicycle Thieves, or The Bicycle Thief, is an S-tier movie. And we say goodbye to the boot-shaped country with the good food and the touchy-feely men. We're going to Norway after this. Much more emotionally enclosed society there. We'll see how it goes when we discuss the film The Worst Person in the World. We saw this one around the same year it came out. It's a very good one as well. One that we really related to in some troubling ways. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested to watch it again.
But at the end of the week, we will once again discuss another Rainer Werner Fassbinder movie with one of his probably one of his most well-regarded movies. One that comes up a lot is Ali, Fear Eats the Soul. So we will be discussing that to close out European Vacation. And then we'll be rolling into Halloween Hump Fest Part 2. All right? So thanks for listening. Thanks for you. Thanks for being you. Thanks for serving cunt. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. Check the show notes for links to other places to find us. And we will get back to you soon.
Arrivederci.